A recent report published by the Urban Indian Health Institute highlights the alarming crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women across urban centers all over the nation. Data for the report was collected from various police departments, including the SLCPD. Among 71 cities, Salt Lake City was in the top 10 for the highest number of these cases. After the report went public, the SLCPD disputed the report on social media, saying the data was inaccurate. If the data in the report came from the SLCPD, how could the data be inaccurate? I spoke with the officer who made the contradicting post on social media.
Alarms went off in my head, quite frankly, that the data that they were pulling didn't seem accurate to me. To have some 20-odd women that were victims of murder here in Salt Lake in that time frame didn't add up. When I started dissecting the numbers that we had turned over to them, I realized that they were including a lot of different categories involving Native American women. And some of those categories were things like natural death, which had no connection to violence, nothing out of the ordinary. We came up with 5 individuals that were involved in homicides. And when we even broke that down, we recognized that we actually, in fact, only had 2 victims of homicide in that time frame that were Native American. And those women were both victims of homicides related to domestic violence. And in fact, both of those had been solved homicides, and we have brought their murderer to justice.
So that explains the social media post, but not where the inaccurate data came from. I got a hold of the co-author of the report to see if I could find out what was going on.
We published the numbers that Salt Lake City Police Records Department provided to us. They sent us a spreadsheet with names, addresses, all sorts of different kinds of information. They didn't tell us that those people weren't missing or murdered. We were operating under a reasonable assumption that we filed a request for missing and murdered. They gave us this list of names. This must be people who are missing or murdered. And when they explained that those numbers included folks who were missing and then safely located, folks who were witnesses on particular cases, and that it wasn't just current missing persons and homicide cases, why is your records department providing us with information we didn't request? We did the best that we could to verify, but of course many of those names, there was no media coverage of what happened and no publicly accessible information, so we utilized the numbers that they gave us based on that list of names.
After looking at the records request, Anita was right. This was the spreadsheet she received. The spreadsheet contains dozens of irrelevant data points, including natural deaths and witnesses. After making the records request, Anita tried to clarify information on the spreadsheet, but received no response. Given how this records request was handled, the Salt Lake City Police Department accidentally put themselves in the top 10 spot. Anita also explains how collecting and reporting the data became part of the story.
We knew that these stories of these women were powerful, and we knew that they were impactful, but we weren't sure how, non-Native communities were going to receive the report, if it would even get off the ground and people noticed it. And we really weren't sure what kind of response we would get. So in terms of some of the responses from law enforcement agencies, it's been a really illuminating process. I think one of the issues that we highlight in the report is inaccurate data. It's been interesting to see, in Salt Lake City Police is one of those agencies that followed up with us and basically said, hey, this information's wrong. It's been interesting to see that they've actually proven our point, which is that these records departments are understaffed. They're not responding to these requests in a timely manner. They're not providing accurate data, and it sometimes can be negligent to the point of putting victims at risk through being careless about this data.
In light of this information, I decided to follow up with Officer Wilking to see what he made of this records request.
Looking at that, that's the first time I'd seen that back and forth, and I can understand where some of the problems happened in terms of getting the information from us and then what information was given. It lends itself to what the report is saying, which is oftentimes it's hard to get this information from government entities, and then it's hard to decipher that information, and it's hard to know exactly what the information means that's being provided. Some of that information is lingo and that we use versus what the general public may understand. So I think really it highlights some of what was in the report, and the takeaway I think is that we recognize those issues and we work to move forward and try to resolve some of that. Certainly we'll look at ourselves and be critical of that and be accountable to that. We need to learn from it. And then, recognize that we believe there is a problem, and we want to work with these populations to identify the problem and make sure that it's getting reported.
He also said the department would support efforts to reform record-keeping statewide. With all of this said, both parties expressed that they wished to move forward and leave this matter in the past. We hope this story helps clear the air and promotes a productive dialogue. Brendan O'Leary, Park City Television.